Hello, great souls. Welcome to Living Yoga Satsang, Autobiography of a Yogi, reflections on this beautiful sacred text. Let's begin together with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of self-realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and Paramhansa Yogananda ji, saints of all religions, friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, we humbly bow to you all. Guide us this day as we reflect upon these teachings. Help us to receive the blessings offered us, to apply them to our journey, and to awaken to our own divine soul nature within. Om, peace. Amen. Okay, great souls. So we're on a new chapter this week. We moved to chapter 28, really amazing chapter called Kashi, Reborn and Rediscovered. So last week we were talking about many things, but one of the things we touched upon in last week's chapter was the soul being ready to leave the physical body for its next incarnation, or its next, it's not always a physical incarnation, but the soul is ready to evolve. So many times on the journey of awakening, we are reincarnating. This is the teaching of yoga. Swami Kriyananda asked Yogananda one time if those living on earth who leave their physical body always come back to earth. And Yogananda said, no, that would be too easy, which is very interesting. Asha's talked about this, like why it would matter, like what's wrong with it being easy? I don't know. But Yogananda said there are many planets with many inhabitants. So very interesting. So he said, no, we don't always come back to earth. We do come back to souls we have known before. So we are drawn magnetically to souls that we have known, and we may be born into families, right, where we have that. It really depends. There is I'm trying to think of something Swami said. Well, there's just so many interesting stories about reincarnation, coupled with consciousness and how that plays out, right? So how conscious we are as we leave the body, as we exit the physical body, and how conscious we are when we come into the body. A remarkable story that apparently is true that I heard. So in India, if you don't know this, that one of the practices is to burn the bodies. It's a sacred practice, burning the body, and you're releasing the soul. There's a story that there was a Swami who was observing a family that was saying goodbye to a young son. I think he was in his 20s. I don't know exactly the age, but that was about the age that I recall. And the Swami cried out to the family and said, do not burn that body, I need it. Ran to the body, and I don't know what happened to the Swami's body. I don't know if it dropped. I really don't know that part of the story. But the body of the young man sat up and got off of the fire, the platform in which he was going to be burned, and ran into the forest. And I've been told there are many miraculous stories like this in India. You know, the teachings are it's complex. It's a huge country. There's much diversity, but there is a deep, rich understanding of spiritual tradition and spirituality. It's embedded. I've not visited yet in this lifetime. I've just heard a lot. I have many Indian friends, and certainly with the teachings of yoga, it would be natural that there's a affinity for India. Yogananda called India the guru planet, country. He said India's holds the energy of the guru, that it's just steeped in the earth, in the consciousness. So these kinds of stories, not only would these things happen, but these stories would be told, right? That it's remarkable. I don't know what to say about it other than that, but it ties in to this remarkable story of Kashi. So Kashi was a young student of Yogananda's. The chapter begins with Yogananda being with the boys. Last week we were finishing up that his school has been, right, that was a story of starting a Ranchi school for boys. So in this chapter, he's with the boys and he receives inner guidance to tell them not to dip into the water, into this cool pool of water. And most obey him, but a few boys don't, and they jump in. And the minute they get into the water, they're surrounded by snakes. Now, nothing ill comes of that. They're able to get out. It's very fascinating that he tells that and then goes on to talk about the boys were asking him questions about their lives. What's my destiny? One boy asked him about his destiny, and Yogananda said, you will be forcibly removed from the school, and later you will marry. And the young boy said, absolutely not, that will not happen. But in fact, it did happen. He was forcibly removed, and by his family, he was removed. And then later, Yogananda heard he did marry. So within this group of students, the young boy Kashi asks about his future, his fate. And Yogananda said, right, what came out, which surprised Yogananda, was that you shall soon be dead. And he said, as soon as he said that, he himself felt grief about it. He was surprised. He didn't expect to say that. Kashi, naturally taken aback by this news, asked Yogananda, if I die, will you find me, right? And bring me back to the spiritual path. Yogananda didn't answer him initially because, well, I'm not going to say because, one of the things that is said about masters, they are very reluctant to give their word for something because they always do what they speak. They speak truth, and so they don't give a promise like that lightly. And he didn't give him that promise initially, but he said for weeks, Kashi would return to him determined, if I die, will you find me? Will you find my soul and bring it back, bring it to the spiritual path? And Yogananda said, yes. He said, yes, I promised so he agreed. He said, yes, I promise if the Heavenly Father lends his aid, I will try to find you. So it's also interesting that he's just reminding Kashi and all of us reading the chapter, it's always about divine will. So even a master, even if they say they'll do something, they're letting us know that in accordance with divine will. So if something feels right, again, I'm reminded of a story Yogananda told Swamiji about Swamiji when Yogananda was writing the commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. Swami's his image appeared to him, and he felt the Divine Mother was guiding him to bring Swamiji out to this desert retreat to help him, ultimately to do some editing, do some writing. And he told Swami, I asked Divine Mother 3 times, right? And 3 times he was shown, yes, bring him. He used to call him Walter. Swami's American name or English name was Donald Walters, and for some reason, Yogananda from day one called him Walter, which to Swamiji was very dear. He appreciated, he knew his name. Why he called him that, we don't know. So this idea of the soul's journey, the soul's destiny, right? It has its, there's a divine timing to our birth and to our physical birth, our physical transition, physical death. Recently I heard, it was Asha was talking about it, but I may have shared it in one of our series together, that the astrological timing is exact. So when we leave the physical body, it carries the same precise timing as physical birth does. And it's just a way for all of us to have a sense of the rightness of things that may not seem right. So here a young boy, Yogananda says, soon you will be dead. So then he promises, okay, I will, I'll find you, I'll try and find you. And Yogananda said that he put out a soul call to Kashi's soul. The Kashi, in fact, oh, here's the other thing I don't want to forget to say. So Yogananda had to go away on a trip, and he said to Kashi, stay within the school. No matter what happens, do not leave the spiritual vibrations of this school. And Yogananda had a sense that if Kashi could stay in the vibrations while Yogananda was gone, he would be protected. And so, so he says that to him, and then he leaves. The next day, Kashi's father comes and tries to remove him from the school, and he refuses. He won't go. So for 15 days, the father tried to get him to leave, and he wouldn't go. And his father kept saying, just leave for 4 days and come see your mother, and then I'll bring you back. In essence, you know, the father is saying, it's not a big deal. Just come with me for a short time and I'll bring you back. Finally, the father, so frustrated, says, all right, I'm going to get the police, and the police will remove you. Kashi did not want that kind of what could be bad publicity for the school, that a parent has to bring police and remove a child. So he agrees to go. He says, okay, I'll go. And so Yogananda comes back. He hears what had happened. He immediately goes to find Kashi, and on the way there, he sees the father and the family in mourning, in procession in mourning. Kashi has died. And, you know, interestingly, Yogananda says of himself that he chastised the father, and the father understood that he had done wrong. But Yogananda said, you know, I don't have the exact word, but in essence it was, I'll see if I can find it easily. I don't have it easily, but it was something to the effect of murderous father, which, and Yogananda says, you know, harsh words for a grieving father, but perhaps he was needing to, and this is my guess now, he doesn't say this is the case, but perhaps the reason he said that was to really emphasize the wrong the father had done. And the father, so then he says the father understood he had done wrong. He should not have removed Kashi from the school. So the words that come to mind in this moment, you know, soul lessons for the father. It's not easy. That would not be an easy lesson at all. So, okay, now Kashi is gone from this physical body, and Yogananda fulfills his promise to try and find him. And he begins to send out, to broadcast from his soul to the soul of Kashi. And he can perceive in the astral realm vibrating light of many souls. And he's wondering, how will I be able to recognize the soul of Kashi? So he uses a technique of raising the hands, and the hands become an antenna, and he's sending out very strongly from the spiritual eye the thought of, you know, seeking Kashi's soul. And he does this for 6 months. For 6 months, he does this practice, listening, what he called the radio. So, you know, kind of the divine radio vibrations. And he, many times Yogananda talked about that thought and consciousness is really about vibration. So we can tune into, in fact, much of in this story is the law of magnetism, right? So he's got this, he as a master would be a magnet, but he's utilizing the strong soul call to magnetically draw to him the soul of Kashi, that he can hear that soul, he can feel that soul. In our practice with yoga, part of what we do in all of the practices, Yogananda said that what we're doing is developing our own magnetism to draw the grace of the masters, to draw the grace of the teachings. So the attitude that we carry plays a part in cultivating magnetism. One of the reasons we pray at the beginning of the Satsang talk is, I do this for myself, and I invite all of you to do it, so that we are consciously setting a tone of receptivity and recognizing with reverence what it is we're talking about, what it is we're inviting, that we consciously invite the grace of the masters to guide us in our time together. I ask for guidance as I'm speaking. As you're listening, the intention of the prayer is that you be guided in your listening, so that you hear what's meant for you today. If there is something meant for you, that you be able to hear that. So that is a way for us to be practicing what Yogananda's talking about in this chapter. We're attuning our consciousness. We're trying to hear, receive, align ourselves with a particular vibration. We're doing it with the masters, with the teachings of yoga, ultimately with God, the ultimate reality. He's doing this with Kashi's soul. So he tells a story that one day he's walking, he's with friends, and in the marketplace, he does the practice of raising his hands, and he said he knew that when he found Kashi's soul, he would be able to experience it in his hands. It would tingle, he would feel that sense of tuning, that, okay, I'm close to Kashi. So one day in the marketplace, he's practicing this, and it happens. He begins to feel. And then he said he starts going around in a circle with his hands raised. His friends were amused by what he was doing, as were others passers-by. So I find that interesting as well. I always am... these different stories come to mind as I'm talking, so a different story, but I can see the connection. There's a different story that Yogananda was very playful. So part of what he's saying here, his friends are amused, passerbys are amused. So part of his point is he's unfettered, like he's untouched by that. He's listening, he's tuning in, he's faithful to what he's doing, no matter what others think. That's not an easy thing to do. In my experience, to be practicing something that others might find odd or unusual and make fun of or poke fun at. I think I've talked about this previously in this series because Yogananda periodically highlights what those near him, how they respond to his practices, how they respond to his intuition, how they respond to his knowing. A lot of times he's standing alone, that those closest to him find it humorous. So there is a characteristic in that of he's off, right? Like he's off somehow, and we are kind of putting up with, right? So if I'm one of his friends in the story, like, oh, there he goes again. In school, they called him Mad Monk. Right? So people did not understand him. Many people did not. That happens often on the spiritual path, that it's not an easy thing. Now, he had great strength and great dedication. I mean, this is the whole story of Autobiography. He's committed, right? But he shows us what it looks like to be steadfast and faithful and take the next step, to follow divine guidance. Swami told a story. I was reminded of this when I was reading the chapter when, so here's the child Kashi asking Yogananda, what's my fate? You'll die. And then he's surprised by what comes out of him. Swami tells the story that he was with someone one time and he found himself putting his hand on the person's kind of up here is what I felt and what he was saying. And he told him, a cold is coming on, you are well. Right? It's this will, now maybe the person had mentioned the cold, I don't know, but what Swami observed in himself is he made a declaration of healing for this person that surprised him. He really felt like, wow, he didn't normally do things like that. He didn't expect to do it seconds before he did it. But he could feel that in the doing of it, he could feel that divine power moving through him. I was listening to a talk he was giving and where he shared the story. And in the talk, he was saying to all of us, be attentive to that inner guidance, because it won't always make sense to you. But if it really does feel true and it feels right, and last time I was talking about truth is always beneficial. So it's so sensitive, the practice of spirituality. I mean, we can be off, we can make mistakes. We don't want to be practicing with a closed-minded dogmatism where I'm not questioning things and I'm, just kind of bulldozing my way through. We don't want to be doing that. But at the same time, we need to have some space within ourselves to actually be surprised by the divine guidance we receive. And if it feels right, to be steadfast in that. I remember one time I was working, I had a private student come to me, and so here's where I didn't do it, so I'll just tell that story. So he came in the door, I had a studio, he came in, and as soon as he came in, I felt to put my hand tenderly on the side of his face. I would never had done anything like that before. It was so odd to do that to me that I didn't. I felt it. I felt to do that, to just cup the side of his face and just gaze at him for a moment is what I felt. Now, I greeted him warmly and we sat down and talked. In the middle of our talking, he told me, in essence, of a vision or a message that he had in which Divine Mother came and placed her hand right on his cheek. I thought, wow, okay, I missed that moment. It didn't feel right or even helpful to tell him that I had felt inspired to do that. But I was really clear in his sharing how powerful it would have been for him if I had. It was for him. It was for him. And in that moment, I felt cautious. I felt hesitant. It felt odd, right? I knew I was being guided to do it, but it just felt a little odd. So I didn't. It was a lesson for me. That's why I'm sharing it. It was a lesson to say, follow that guidance. Follow that guidance, right? Just be willing to be different. Be willing to be different. And the truth is, whatever would have happened, you could do something and someone would say, what made you do that? I could have said, I felt guided to. I could say that. Like, yeah, I'm not sure why. Often that is what I will do when I'm meeting with someone privately. And this more often will come up, not with a gesture, so much as it might be a story, or it might be something, a word or something. And I tend to feel it. If I feel it, I'll give it a little bit of time, and if it just keeps asserting itself, like, okay, then I'll say, I find myself thinking of this while we're talking. I'll share it. Quite often, it's revealed in the conversation how that is actually very meaningful to them. I don't know why it's meaningful, right? But they do. They know why it's meaningful. So here's Yogananda telling us that it's possible to tune into other souls. It's possible. There's another story of a couple who wanted a spiritually inclined child. And Yogananda gave them guidance for drawing a spiritually inclined child to them. So he tells these stories so that we understand what's going on behind the scenes, behind what's obvious. So there he is, tuning in the marketplace, feeling the soul of Kashi. And he can feel, someone is pregnant with him. And it must be near. And he gets clear about exactly where, some street, some lane, and he goes there, right? He goes there and he goes to the house. He follows the vibration and he goes to the house, and a servant answers the door and she says, oh, yes, my master's home, I'll go get him. So she goes and gets the man of the house, and he comes down, and Yogananda said, sir, are you and your wife expecting a child? For 6 months. Have you been, right, did you conceive 6 months ago? And the man said yes. And then Yogananda said, because Yogananda was dressed in an ochre robe, it was clear he was a monk, it was clear he was a Swami, that man, again, in India, great reverence, had an immediate sense of respect for Yogananda and his questions. And so then Yogananda told him the story. He said, I believe that my former student, Kashi, is the child being born to you. And when this child is born, he will have these characteristics, like his face will have a certain shape, which is interesting, and he'll have a certain look in his hair, and he'll have a spiritual nature. Your son will have a spiritual nature. In fact, that happened. So the child was born, and they actually named the child Kashi. And so that child later became a teenager and connected with Yogananda when Yogananda was in America, just indicating that he had the spiritual, let me see if he says, years later, the teenage boy wrote me during my stay in America. He explained his deep longing to follow the path of a renunciate. I directed him to a Himalayan master who to this day guides the reborn Kashi. Remarkable, right? Just truly remarkable. It's one of the teachings of yoga that the masters and a guru in particular will guide our soul for a life, forever, for eternity, right? Until we've attained self-realization, and then even in that, the relationship, there's a special bond. So the idea being that what I'm feeling, the reason I'm saying that is I'm seeing that in here. And so the other thing that's said about the gurus is they will direct you to your guru. So if the guru is your guru, but in a life where they're not in a physical body, they don't have to be in a physical body for us to relate to them and receive guidance and grace and all the support we need. We do need to have, most of us, it is said, we need to have help and support with teachers. Right? But sometimes the guru will send us to another master. So even though they're still our guru, but they'll ask another master to help us on their behalf. So in some ways, and he didn't say he was Kashi's guru, but he certainly was his teacher, his spiritual teacher, and he was able to direct Kashi to another master, right? And that master continues to look after him and take care of him. So really a remarkable, beautiful story. It's for me personally, a comforting story that this sense of the divine grace continuing with us in our life, right? So just pondering to see if there's a statement from Krishna that says, every step taken, every effort made on the spiritual path is never lost. And so there's something in this story and something in this that we're never lost. So, and the more that we call out to the divine and ask to be held and protected, wherever I go, whatever happens, keep me on the path, send me the support I need, guide me to the teachings, the teachers that will help me in my journey. These are powerful prayers that in my experience, God does answer for us. So I think I'll end with that today with our chapter and just invite you to keep calling out to the divine and ask for that support. One of our yoga practices is our affirmation, with calm faith, I open to thy light. So I offer that for you today, of just a calm sense of faith that the divine light is guiding you and is responding and will respond to your soul call. Okay, great souls. Good to be with you today. Many blessings.